Thrilled to see so many people register for this session. It really reinforces the importance of having these conversations. So just to provide a bit of context for this session, this is the first of three discussions aimed at exploring the importance of cultural heritage, in particular Black heritage in the legal profession. The theme for today's discussion is empowering lawyers in diaspora to forge Africa's cross-continental alliances. As someone who began life as a competition lawyer at Lovells and then at Linklaters and then transitioned into a variety of business development roles at Allen & Overy, Norton Rose Fulbright, and a number of other firms, and is now focused on African law firms and in-house legal teams, I wholeheartedly believe that my Africanness is a superpower that shouldn't be hidden, diluted, or moderated. Sadly, however, it's taken me about 25 years within the profession to be in a position to confidently voice that and hold that as a position. And that's the reason that I personally feel really strongly that we need to engage in not just storytelling, but audible and ongoing storytelling. Quite often the stories about people's successes and even their failures is told behind closed doors. And if you're privy to that information, it's fantastic, but we don't often have the opportunity to have these conversations openly. I really think that if we can do that more often, we can provide not just inspiration, but actually some really practical strategies and suggestions for those that are in law firms right now who are trying to navigate that path, simply by listening to both the successes and the failures of those that have achieved a level of success within the firms and also within in-house legal teams across Africa. I think we can hopefully start to learn lessons from each other and really importantly also avoid pitfalls of those that have gone ahead in the journey. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce our four very illustrious panelists who are going to be sharing their stories and insights with us this afternoon. Joining us on the law firm side, we have Segun Osuntokun, who is Global Senior Partner at BCLP. For those who aren't aware, Segun is actually the firm's first Global Senior Partner. Quite frankly, in my view, he is an absolute legal rock star and trailblazer, if I can say that, in terms of everything that he's achieved. He heads the firm's civil fraud litigation practice and also their Africa practice, with many of his cases either relating to or originating from sub-Saharan Africa. We also have Jennifer Chimango, who is partner and co-head of the Africa Group at Clifford Chance, also global TMT sector lead at CC. Jen is recognized as a leader in her space, has a really strong focus on Africa. She's someone that I've known and respected for a really long time, having originally connected through International Lawyers for Africa. I'm excited that she's here to share her story and her insights. On the in-house side of the house, we have Edith Onwuchekwa, who is legal director and company secretary at Seplat Energy PLC, leading energy company in Nigeria, which also has subsidiaries in the UK. Edith was also formerly GC at Lafarge Africa. I'm thrilled that she's made time in her busy schedule to join us. And last by no means least is Seyi Kosoko, who is former GC and COSEC at First Bank. He's now principal consultant at Henley Cranshaw. Seyi has done a number of roles, head of legal at Standard Chartered, GC at Citibank Nigeria, CLO at Econote, which is now Airtel. He's an incredibly experienced in-house lawyer and also a really, really active member of the community that I run, ACGC. He actually spoke at our first ACGC conference about 5 or so years ago. So a warm welcome to each of you. Thank you so much for your commitment to making this session possible. Before I hand over, and I will stop talking in a minute, two things in terms of housekeeping. Can I just encourage you to remain on mute until we get to the Q&A? At which point we'll take questions and have a short discussion. But in the interim, please feel free to share your comments, your thoughts, and your questions in the chat function. I really want us to maximize the opportunity that this session presents. The format is that our panelists will present on 4 areas: personal experiences of leveraging one's Black heritage, understanding the legal landscape, success strategies for those that are in UK firms, and then immediate opportunities for African lawyers in diaspora. We're aiming to leave about 10 minutes at the end for Q&A. So with all that said, I will hand over to you, Sharon. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Cynthia, for that great introduction. And thank you again to all of our amazing panelists today. And thank you to everyone who's joined. You had an amazing response to this. Anyway, I'm Sharon Thomas. I'm the founder of Black Counsel Forum, which is a community for Black lawyers, mainly in the UK, but increasingly in Europe. And the purpose is just to bring together the amazing Black talent that we have in the legal profession, for us to get to know each other, to connect with each other, to support each other, to encourage and empower each other. That's what Black Counsel Forum is about. And it's also about just having a safe space, like Cynthia said, you know, to have these important conversations. And this conversation is very important to us. It's important that we are setting our own agendas. So with that, just thanks again for joining today. Because we've only got an hour, I'm just going to jump straight in with the first question, if you don't mind. And this is actually a question for Jennifer or Shagan, so you can choose who wants to go first. And the question is, can you just share a bit of your personal journey in becoming a lawyer in London, and how has your African heritage influenced that journey? Who wants to take it first?
I'll go first. Sorry. Listen, in my Kenyan culture, the elder folks go last.
There you are.
That's cheeky.
Going and aging me all at the outset. That's it's fine, Jen, and I'm happy to speak very briefly. It would be good to hear from you as well, Jen. So I do hope there's enough of a time for both of us to speak. My story is very brief. It's very direct. I was born in Nigeria. I spent the formative years in Nigeria from the ages of 0 to 15 in Nigeria, in the Nigerian educational system, with a couple of years outside of it, but not materially so that it affected my considering myself as having been brought up to that age in Nigeria. So that's my background. That's where I formed my identity. And it's, for those of you who are interested in psychology will know that those are the formative years. They give you a sense of who you are. So I consider myself very much Nigerian, very much African. But as you will see, I have spent a considerable amount of time also in the UK, more time than I've spent in Nigeria living. But given the importance of those formative years, my Nigerian heritage is very key to my identity and what I do as a lawyer. I came to England at the age of 15, went to university here, didn't do any university in Nigeria, but very importantly, after my first degree, which was in economics, I went back to Nigeria to do my national service. And those of you who are Nigerian will know how much of a rite of passage that is. So I did my orientation camp in a beautiful camp outside of Ibadan. After my national service, I came back to England to do a law degree, and I have stayed in England since then. I qualified as a solicitor in the early 90s. I've worked in the city for over 30 years. My African-ness comes through in the business I pursue, the approaches I take to cross-cultural issues, be they African or elsewhere. I am Nigerian British, and my family is very much rooted in their Nigerian heritage as well. Even though they're only half Nigerian, they still very much imbibe the Nigerian side of their identity. How has it influenced my career? As I'll talk about later on, I got my first break as a litigator when I was a senior associate from a Nigerian matter. It came across to me directly because I kept up in my years away from Nigeria my very strong connections in the legal and business world. And it was as a result of those cultivating and maintaining those friendships and relationships that I got my first big break in the litigation field. And that really directed much of my practice, much of my thinking, using my Africanness to expand, knowing that you can't really be in the city anyway at that time, just focused on one sector or one market. You've got to have a very broad approach. But as I said, the platform I've built as a lawyer, came very much from my African heritage, and it continues. It's a significant part of what I do. So that's my journey. That's my story. Hopefully, it will develop as we go along during this hour. So, Jen, you've got to tell us a little bit about you. You don't get off that easily.
Thank you, and thanks. Just before I give my side of the story, I really just want to thank Cynthia and Sharon for this. What I really believe is an excellent initiative where we get to share our stories, because the stories need to be told, and we can either tell these stories ourselves or others will tell the stories for us. So what you're doing is really important and really impactful. And I also want to thank my fellow panelists for being here as well. So my story is slightly different from Segun's in the sense that I actually spent, if I look at it cumulatively now, I have spent more time in Africa than I have outside of Africa. So by the time I moved to the UK about 12 years ago, all I knew was Kenya and being Kenyan. Okay, there'd been a few stints either visiting the US for a motor court competition or the 3-month secondment program that I did with ILFA, which was very transformational. But Cynthia and Segun were part of that. We can touch on that later on because I think relationships and networks are very important. But really, with a few exceptions, that's all I knew, right? I grew up in a small town in the coast of Kenya, went to University of Nairobi, started my career in Kenya, and had no plans to leave Kenya. I was actually quite happy to stay there for the rest of my life. But then I moved to the UK. For personal reasons, I was chasing love and Clifford Chance. I always make this joke and everyone laughs, but it really was a means to an end at the time because I wanted to remain the independent Jen that I am. I wanted to be financially independent, so I wasn't going to just leave everything that I had built as in love as I was at the time. So that's how I ended up at Clifford Chance. And to answer the specific question, how has my African heritage influenced? For me, it's been everything, right? And, I have now come to learn with hindsight and listening to a lot of people like Segun and others, say you can only be you. I really do fundamentally believe there is only one Jen in this world. And so it was about harnessing my heritage, my culture, my knowledge, whatever it is that I could bring to the table. And being Kenyan was such a big part of that. So much so that for me, it was a no-brainer to join the Africa group when I joined Clifford Chance. And, I remember at the time, the timing was actually quite fortunate because this was kind of post-financial crisis and, investors were beginning to ask international firms what they knew about, the African market. So there was a bit of I should say, serendipitous kind of situation there. But I saw the opportunity and I realized actually there is something that I can offer. I became Kenyan, Zimbabwean, Nigerian, I became all of Africa at once just because it was such few of us. I think I probably was the first lateral hire into Clifford Chance London corporate from Africa. So there wasn't really anyone else. So when there was a deal in Zimbabwe to be done, I was that person who suddenly knew Zimbabwe, et cetera, et cetera. So for me, it's been everything, and I'm happy to share more as we go along. But one specific event that will always remain in my memory was an event that Clifford Chance was trying to organize at the time in Nairobi. They were trying to do their first conference. And they were trying to do this with a local investment bank because they didn't think they knew the market well enough to pull a big crowd. And I remember going into this meeting room and saying to them, of course we can do it by ourselves. Of course we can do it by ourselves. Let's do it. And obviously, fast forward to 6 months later, we had this massive event, CC's first ever event in Nairobi, filled up a conference room at Serena. All the kind of important members of the business community were there, and lawyers, etc. And 12 Clifford Chance partners had flown over from different parts of the world to that event. And I was instrumental in shaping that because I was able to leverage the relationships I had built, particularly with the law firms over the years. And that then sort of kind of just put me out there as this person that, you know, can help build our African business, etc. And I'll pause there for now. But I just wanted to say that for me, my Kenyanness and my Africanness has been everything in terms of building my career at CC.
Oh, amazing. I love that. I love to hear about that strong sense of identity that you both have demonstrated, and you both have, and how that's kind of influenced your career and driven your career. So that's amazing. Thank you, Segun. Thank you, Jennifer, for sharing those stories. Can I hand over to Cynthia now? Is that okay?
Yep, that's fine. I was going to ask, I want to just get our GCs involved in the conversation. So just bearing in mind what Jennifer and Segun have shared, how important is it for you when you're dealing with the international law firms that you engage with in having representation from lawyers of African heritage? You know, to what extent does that impact your selection of international law firms? And if I can come to Edith, perhaps just to share some thoughts on that front.
Yeah, thank you very much, Cynthia. Thank you, Sharon. It's really exciting to be in this panel. Thank you, Segun and Jennifer, for your exciting experience. To get to the question, one thing that is very important is that more than ever now, having African representation in international firms, very, very important. Is as important as the story of ESG or diversity indicator. For me, it demonstrates, you know, the firm's commitment to advance diversity. In my company, currently, I'm the diversity champion. You can imagine, you know, how important it is for me to select external legal partners and the diversity that they must bring to any transaction. So very important because it helps build trust and rapport with an international law firm, you know, also collaborating with an African law firm, for instance. The diversity is very key, and it helps especially the firms relate with the local environment of the company. You know, Africa is our heritage. I keep hearing Segun talk of Africanness, which is very important. You know, when this collaboration happens, it provides an insight into how to navigate, you know, these challenges. Africa is unique. Most times, you know, when we handle transactions, you need to look through a lot: socio-political dimension, cultural heritage, and it really differs. If you go to North Africa, for instance, you will see how the king impacts on most of the transaction. If you go to East Africa, some aspects, you will see how laws, even indigenization, can impact on a transaction. So it's very important to have that mix. So we currently operate a system where we have a panel of law firms, and it takes a lot of screening before any transaction. You know, we look at the I would say membership of the law firm that we are going to choose. If a law firm who is going to work in a transaction in Africa does not have a partnership with an African firm, or even if they don't have Nigerians in the firm, if it's a Nigerian transaction, then it's going to be a big challenge for me, because what I'm looking at is speed of execution. What I'm looking at is an international law firm that understands the local dimension. So all of this is very important in selecting international law firms. And I see, you know, this moving a lot of collaborations between international and African law firm. And it has started, and it will continue to be like that. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Edith. I want to just drill down into that a little bit, and maybe, you know, Shay, you can take this. One of the things that I'm very aware of is just the need to navigate that balance between when you're instructing an international law firm because of their capabilities, and when you're then looking at, a local law firm. So for you as in-house counsel, how do you strike that balance? How does it work that you can, either go to what are you looking for when you're thinking about this should be a local law firm? What are you thinking about, when it's an international law firm, or where it's slightly murky in the middle and there's a choice to be made? It would be great to get some thoughts on how that works.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. And once again, it's a privilege to be part of it. And so Jennifer, Sharon, Cynthia, Edith, and Shakes, the old man. That's what Jennifer is. Jennifer that called you that. Now, it's important. It's important for us to understand that increasingly we have competence in Africa, both in terms of the local firms and also even by the fact that so many of our local lawyers have joined multinationals and have had the opportunity of working across different states. That's number one. Number two is also that over the years, we develop relationships on one hand, but more importantly, you kind of have an idea of the areas of competence of each firm, different people, and everything. And so in choosing the transaction, you have an opportunity to look at the different people, the skill sets, the nuances, and then see how you select who best will be capable of executing. At the end of the day, it's about execution, and it's about speed, it's about understanding, and about hitting the ground running. And so you also, over the years, develop relationships where you know of Black competence in various firms and everything, and all of this. I mean, whether one expresses it openly or not, operates at the back of your mind in choosing. And so where you see the team that's been brought forward by an international law firm, you see the composition, you can then make up your mind about who to take. And when you see where they're encouraging, bringing on Africans or bringing on Black, you see that, yes, there is a willingness here to extend the frontiers. And then when you look at the local side, the truth is, like I was telling some people, amazingly, over especially the last 15 years, we've got some of the best coming out of Africa. And so what we find now is a match of competence. So it's not so much that the person is from a local Nigerian farm. No, it's about that the person knows his onions and is able to deliver, whether male, female, otherwise. So you find that the things that informed choices before are no longer as what they are. So now you find competence across board. And so if you believe in the fact that we must encourage this handshake across the continent and also encouraging the Black talent to grow, we then look at opportunities of bringing them. So sometimes we merge, sometimes we say, look, we need to have this particular team and so on and so forth. So really, it is first competence, but also recognition that there is talent across who are capable. Before it used to be, just give to international firm and they could. I remember when I was running Stanchart, everything actually used to be done from the WB Legal in London. And when I came in and they said, and I said, how can I sign a paper that I'm not reviewed? And then it was because they didn't have the in-house competence. And now you came in, I came in and I developed that, and also could now ensure that more talent are given recognition across the world and across. So we need to look at the talent, we need to recognize the capacity, and then we need to encourage that the international law firms increasingly recognize Black talent. And if it's for African transactions, I believe that a local person like Shegun, someone who has a bank, you don't necessarily have to be here, somebody who understands the nuances and also has relationships is critical. It's critical. So like I would say, if I have 3-4 firms and I'm just being open here, Sheikh is on one of those, I'm going to pick him first. I'm sorry, I don't have any apology to anybody. Yeah, that's just how it goes. Because you're beyond the capacity, you also have relationships. So when there are issues, there are many ways by which you can resolve it. Beyond just the technical legal issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Shay. I mean, it's really interesting to hear sort of the thought process and the considerations that go into that. The one area that I know you haven't touched on, which I want to raise, is money. And I would love to get sort of the views from both sides of the house, because we're having a real conversation, right? So what about rates and pricing? Let me ask this to Jen and Segun first.
Yes.
In the context of African clients, how much is pricing a factor when you're thinking about who to take on as clients? There is often a perception that maybe doing work for African clients is something that should be avoided, is not worth it, etc. I'd love to get your views on that. And then from the in-house side of the house, it would be good to get thoughts again on pricing, but the other way around. So when you're looking at the cost of using an international firm vis-a-vis using firms on the ground. So if I can go to Segun first, just to talk about rates and pricing in the context of African clients.
Thanks, Cynthia. My approach is quite simple. Clients are clients. If a client wants to use an international law firm, I already credit them with a degree of sophistication. They have come to you because they understand through their in-house capacity the need to have international law firm capability for whatever reason, and they would have thought about it. Is this something that can be done by a local law firm, many of whom can hold their own against international law firms in terms of advising both on national law and international law? So I credit them already with that degree of sophistication for wanting to get the advice of an international law firm. So I start from the premise that clients are clients. With clients of every nationality from every region in the world, they want value for money. And in many instances, they want more for less. As I'm sure Shay and Edith will confirm, they want to know that they're paying for what they're paying for is worth the money. It's about value. And of course, from a law firm's perspective, it's about you are ultimately running a business, the business of law. Shay is absolutely right that relationships are key to that, because we're people business, and we're in the business of selling services, but those services are delivered by individuals. So it's relationship based, but it's also about turning a decent profit so that you can keep employing good people, you can keep the lights on, and you can ensure that your clients are being served by the best in the game. So there's a rationale behind the pricing structure. I don't think African clients generically are any less credit worthy or worthy of the service that international law firms are providing. I don't let rates, I don't let the fear that, oh, well, can this client pay, get in the way of establishing a relationship, actually finding out what the client wants. And then you get to the conversation about rates and what it is you're going to be providing for what. But the other truth is, yes, hourly rates are the measure, it's a proxy that most law firms have for measuring value. But we know that one size does not fit all. I have many clients, and I'm sure Jennifer will speak to them, who don't just go by the hourly rate, who want to know, well, you're delivering this milestone for me. What is it going to take to me to get there? Yes, you might use some metric based on an hourly rate to get to me to a number that I'm comfortable with, but give me a number, give me a cap, give me an estimate. So it's a moving feast, but I guess the nub of the question is that of creditworthiness and can they stand the rates? can they pay for international law firm services? I think the answer to that is yes. Of course, as with any other client, if they're asking you to do something which in your own professional estimate you think, well, this is not right for this firm with this particular size, with this particular cost base. An example, somebody comes to me and says, look, I've got a £50,000 debt owed to me by an English law firm. You're a good litigator. Can you take on this matter? I would say to them in all honesty, yes, I can. I will do it very well. But I know that in order for me to recover that money, you will be paying probably just as much in fees. So you've got to take it with a pragmatic approach, understanding the client needs, asking yourself, are we best placed to serve it? And can we do it in a way which is mutually beneficial, both for us and for the client? And yes, of course, you take precautions to ensure that where necessary, you make sure that the ability to pay is fortified. If it's a new relationship, well, can you put some money on account? We ask that of many clients, not just African clients. But of course, once you have a relationship going and you've established trust and confidence, then those sort of arrangements are much more flexible. But short answer is yes, rates are important, but rates are important for every client in every part of the world. And African clients who want international legal services are just as capable of paying those fees as any other client.
Fantastic. Jennifer, did you want to add to that?
No, I have nothing else to add. That clients are clients.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for that response. And I mean, I'm a great believer in exactly the same philosophy, but I think it's really important that gets articulated again as part of these discussions, because it's something that gets said quite often in behind closed doors in rooms where perhaps even younger lawyers are being discouraged from sort of that focus. So Shea and Edith, it would be good to just get your thoughts in terms of, from the in-house legal team or corporate legal department. What is the thought process around pricing? When you're thinking about international firms or not against, but when you're thinking about that in terms of who to use, to what extent is pricing a consideration? Thoughts and reflections.
Jennifer,
Go on.
Okay, let me go ahead. The first thing, and Shegwan's captured it succinctly, there needs to be a pragmatic approach to it. First is to understand that I'm a client, I'm the one with the problem. I don't have inexhaustible funds to deal with it. And so I have a budget, I have some wiggle room and everything. So that automatically informs the kind of firm I can go to, but it's also a function of the complexity of the matter. When you have some matters of certain complexity, price is the least of your considerations. You want to go for those who can deliver. So the price is important, and I always because I deal with a lot of guys and everything. We cut through the chase, so we come to real terms quickly. This is what is available, this is what I can do, what can you do within this? And then we can negotiate. And what I've found is a number of the international, like Shegun said, they are quite reasonable people. They are flexible, they are business people, they are commercial people. And so they understand sometimes it's not from one single brief that I'm going to make all. And when I have a relationship, and I've always told people the key is recurring business. The key is recurring. And so that must always be a factor in the relationship. And I've found out over the years that you kind of are able to work out and you find a balance. Like he said, like Shegun said, they are not a charity. They have a lot to balance it that way. But I believe in value for money, and that's what it means. So I don't believe in just any name or anything. No. I need to see the value. And so that is what is crucial for me. Over to you, Edith.
Yeah, thank you, Cher. You really captured it nicely, and very important for me is the matter itself. The matter is very key, and sometimes when some issues are novel, if it's the first time it's being treated, or especially in Nigeria, it's not so popular, then cost, becomes a little bit insignificant. Having said that, I've been in a transaction where I had to choose an international law firm because at that time, the company I was working with, they were looking at power generation. It was over 10 years ago, and that topic was not so, I would say the expertise was not so much in Nigeria. I chose a global law firm, and because of the lack of understanding of the Nigerian climes, they could not deliver. So if I was looking only at the fact that I had to manage my budget vis-a-vis having two law firms, both international and local, I wouldn't be able to deliver. So on the long run, I had to bring both the international and local law firm together, despite the cost. And that local understanding helped the global law firm with all the global expertise bring on board what was needed, and there was delivery. So one thing, however, I'd like to state is that I've never really liked the idea of hourly rates in especially for African law firms. I always ask them, where is your clocking system? Do you even have a clock? How do you assess it? How do you assess that? So honestly, if you ask some of the law firms that I have dealt with, I refuse it and I stick with a fixed lumps sum. But I think the legal, I would say, delivery of business is actually evolving. While we may accept all these hourly rates and clocking, we need to ensure that we're delivering value for money, which is key. The important thing is to ensure that our expertise is really affecting and helping businesses, whether international or locally. So in terms of cost, I mix both. I mix both international and local expertise, but also, of course, I would want to negotiate the cost to ensure that it fits my budget, but it doesn't drive my decision. The ability to deliver is the ultimate goal, and that is what drives my decision. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for those responses. Sharon, over to you.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. Thank you, Edith and Shaya, and Shagan and Jennifer for the insights. I mean, my takeaway from that is that I think there's a lot of myths around Africa generally, but one of them is that in terms of rates, it's not going to deliver. And I think that you've busted through that myth while still maintaining that value for money is important, right? And I think as we're this digital age, AI and so on, value for money and competition is going to be very, very important. Can I just turn now to just thinking about some of the practical help that we can give for people on the call? Just thinking, what are some of the strategies that can be deployed or that you've deployed in helping to build your Africa practices, Jennifer and Shagan in particular? This question is targeted at you, and even just sharing with us maybe practice areas that lawyers should look at. Are there specific practice areas where you're going to be more successful than others? So any tips that you can share would be very much appreciated.
Jennifer's going first on this, I insist.
That's all right. Thanks. It's very, very fascinating to listen to the conversation. And can I think this will partly answer your question, Sharon, but can we just address the talent question? Because I think we make this point, I think it was Shay who made this point around, obviously you need to have the talent, etc. I just want to say categorically, and I'm addressing those that are in an international law firm, if you're someone of African heritage and you've gotten through those revolving doors, your talent is not in question. And that's the first thing you've got to recognize for yourself, that, and I just, I speak from my own experience, right? And also recognizing the world we live in and how challenging it still is. up to this very day, just to have a world that is free of biases or perceptions or presumptions. We still live in that world. So if you're there sitting at your desk in an ILF, you absolutely have the talent. And the question then becomes, how do you harness that talent and how do you leverage your Africanness? And so I would actually just start by saying, believe in yourself. I know that sounds really cliche, but I'm just going to say, believe in yourself that I am here because I absolutely deserve to be here and I have something to offer. And I'm excellent. I should add that. That's number one. Number two, understand your firm's strategy, because a lot of international law firms call themselves global law firms. We live in a world where no one can really claim to be truly global when they're ignoring Africa. I mean, I'm not the in-house lawyer on this call, but if a law firm turned up to me calling themselves a global law firm and did not have African representation or were able to articulate where Africa sits in their global viewpoint, I would really question that and challenge that in this day and age. And so if you're the African lawyer sitting in a global law firm, begin asking yourself, okay, I am of African heritage, I'm Kenyan, I have relationships in Kenya, I understand the landscape. How does that fit into the global strategy of the firm? And how can I contribute to that aspect of the strategy? So that's what I did. So I tend to use the analogy of a cake, right? The cake is your skills. It's Segun's skills as a litigator. You have to be a top-class litigator. That is not negotiable. And I don't actually think that's in question, as I've said. And so if you're building this cake, building your skills, in my case, is tech M&A, learning about technology, doing M&A, building my expertise, it's then bringing that icing that says, hey, tech company X, global tech company X that's looking to enter into Africa, I can tell you about this market and that other market. And not only that, I have relationships that could be useful to you, like, Nigerian law firms, South African law firms. I can speak to the managing partner or senior partner of, law firm X in South Africa, and that they will be able to unlock more relationships and opportunities for you. So that's the icing that you bring onto the cake. When I was in my kind of journey, developing my career at CC, someone gave me this example of, we talk a lot about, white privilege and, our colleagues that have had the privilege of going to really good schools like Oxford and Cambridge. They absolutely leverage that every day of their life. The person that went to Oxbridge will tell me they went to Oxbridge before I tell them I'm Kenyan. So I need to leverage that which is uniquely mine. So own your heritage. Of course, you've baked the cake. Now add the icing on the cake. Understand where African fits in the new world order, right? We're now living in a world where, the whole sort of decoupling conversation took place. The, globalization is looking very much at risk. It's, increasingly fragmented. We've now got the AI revolution coming into the mix of all of that. Most of the critical resources that are fueling this new revolution are based on the African continent. Where is Africa sitting in this conversation? And then bring those insights to your clients. And then my final point that we'll make around relationships particularly with the African law firms, because they are the people on the ground. They are the people who are dealing with these issues for clients every single day of their life. And they can be a really useful source of insights. So developing those relationships with them, learning from them, and then bringing those insights to our clients. I mean, we've got Edith and Shaya here who absolutely know Africa. Their counterparts that are sitting in Atlanta, Georgia, or wherever it is, or Silicon Valley, may not know these markets as well as, Shaya and Edith do. And they would really, really value those insights. So be that person that is able to get those insights and bring them to your clients. I'll pause there.
I love that, Jennifer, particularly, what you were saying about being loud about who you are and the relationships that you have, because that's unique. Your chap from Oxford doesn't have those connections. He doesn't have that local market knowledge, or he doesn't have those relationships that Shay was talking about earlier. So I think, just being really expressive about that is excellent. Thank you for that, Jennifer. Shagan, it'd be great to hear about your experiences as well, and how you sort of leveraged your relationships to help build your global practice.
Thanks, Sharon, and thanks, Jen. I think you summarized quite a lot about the points I also had, but perhaps just add one or two of my own personal insights. First of all, the landscape in international law firms has changed massively, and as Jennifer has said, if you call yourself an international law firm and you don't have something to say about the African continent, whether it's north of the Sahara, sub-Saharan Africa, or individual jurisdictions, then you're missing a trick. 20 years ago, when I was on the senior associate, called up to act for the Nigerian government, the law firm I was at, the partners I went to, and I said, look, we've got this great opportunity, essentially said, really, the Nigerian government, corruption this, and are we going to get paid that? And some of them just looked at me almost as if what I use smoky. But the proof was in the pudding, because the case turned out to be a significantly remunerative piece of work. It launched my career as a civil fraud litigator. I moved with it to another law firm, and that law firm that I moved to, which was DLA Piper, actually started off on its own African journey, and as many of you would know, is now one of those firms that is in Africa in a big way. The landscape has changed, so if you're in a law firm that doesn't have much of a focus on it, ask yourself, what are they doing? You can be the change yourself. You can point to other law firms. I think Jennifer's talked about Clifford Chance. They've been barnstorming in Africa, as you talked about 12 partners going to a reception in Nairobi. I'm not surprised. Every time I'm in Lagos, I'm always hearing about, these partners from Clifford Chance have just left, or they're coming. Much to my chagrin, but it's all's fair in love and war. But I'm making the serious point that it's pointing out things like that to your partners to say, look, when you have firms of that size, with that cloud, pitching their tent and seeking serious business and doing serious business in Africa, you cannot, even if it's just a defensive strategy, you need to look at it closely. So that changing landscape and pointing to firms that have made a big play in Africa gives you a lot of ammunition to sell your connections. But as Jennifer has also said, talent and your skills are first and foremost. You need to be able to layer the base of the cake with strong skills, and the jurisdictional focus is an added, not just an extra, but it's part of it. It's not just a nice to have. Without it, you're not complete. So you can sell yourself in that way. Take what the firm has, whether it's its sector focus or its strategic focus or practice area, and say, well, the firm is already good at this, but what about looking at the African market, whether it's advising clients going into investing in Africa or indigenous African clients like Edith and Cher have worked for, who are looking outside for capital, for to expand. Take what the firm and you have got and look at it through that jurisdiction-specific focus. And the third is what Jenna said about relationships. They're key. Maintaining those relationships with local law firms, with your own network of contacts, both in Africa, in the jurisdictions you're interested in, and in England and elsewhere. Network, because it's a numbers game. You don't know where the call is going to come from next. So take that heritage, operationalize it, make it into something that you can, that's part of your armory, and use the platform you have to get what you want. So those are my additions to what Jennifer so amply described.
Thank you both. Really, really valuable insights, suggestions and strategies. And, you know, as I said at the beginning, this is the first of many conversations. So I think, you know, it's great that we've started, and I think there's some very practical takeaways about what to do. At some point, probably on a future session, I think we also should look at what not to do. But I'm very conscious of time. I know we said we would run for 5 o'clock. I think we may run slightly over. I want to just quickly get a take from the GCs in terms of what are, and if you could just do this in sort of a 30-second, these are my thoughts. What are the key, from your perspective, what are the key opportunities or emerging trends in Africa right now that lawyers on this call, based here in the UK or, you know, somewhere else in diaspora, should be aware of? I think if you could just address those points, and then we will leave some time for questions. So if you do have a question that you want our panel to address, could I just ask that you start putting that in the chat now, so that once Shay and Edith have finished, Sharon can then run through the questions, and we will round up as soon as we can. Brilliant. Who's going first? Edith, Shay?
Yeah, just to, in 1 second is a bit difficult, but I would say some of the key trends are cross-border transactions. These are evolving regulatory reforms. You know, I worked as an expatriate in a company, and I found out that just something as simple as competition law, when it was being established in Nigeria, there was a lot of best practice, you know, required. So look at the regulatory reforms in Africa. Digital transformation has been mentioned. AI, it is evolving. ESG initiatives. I was really alarmed that some companies, you know, did not really know what ESG means. So that's one of the things, you know, when you say that international law firms should invest in Africa, I would really support, because one thing we do is that when you want jobs here as an international firm, we ask you to bring your knowledge sharing. You know, if you're an ESG company, what have you done? How have you educated people on that? How have you mentored people on that? So a lot of, you know, our diaspora lawyers can really do well on that, because you need to find a point to get into the system. So look at such evolving topics, international commercial disputes. Like we say, Africa is evolving, and when we look at these very, very key points, we'll be able to tap in. But the key thing to note is that for African lawyers, wherever they are, is that courage is very important, and confidence. I do say that sometimes our education could be limiting, but if we know, you know, that we have this resilience within us, wherever we are, we would always stand out. Thank you.
Thanks, Edith.
Well, Edith, you see, for me, the first thing I'll say is that every possible area is available in Africa. You'll be amazed at the level of transactions that are being done by small companies, unknown, not just the big names and everything. It's amazing. I know of some small, mid-sized companies that are dealing in transactions, M&As, ongoing now, that are in the hundreds of millions of US. And then also, see, one of the things we need to understand is that there is still a lot of opportunity. I mean, let me put it this way: in developmental issues, Africa is still going to take a long to catch up. So when you're talking about renewables and everything, I tell people, yeah, it is good to look at that, but for some time to come, your basic oil and gas is still going to be the main thing and power for Africa. It's just how it is. You can't give what you don't have. You start with what you have. And so I would like our diaspora lawyers to be open-minded, to see opportunities. Like the story they say, oh, somebody came and said they all walk barefoot. There's no business there. Another sees the whole opportunity. I'm saying there's a whole opportunity. So that's number one. But more importantly, is to know who you are and to know that you are not less than anybody. You know, like they say for us, we Nigerians, we don't agree for anybody, you know. If you are saying somebody is the best, you bringing me on, as far as I'm concerned, I'm up to him. That is what it takes, you know. And I ask and just tell everybody, like I told somebody, he's not carrying fire on his head. If he's paid the price, you should be willing to pay the price and see yourself as competent as any other. And what we find increasingly, we are seeing from out of Africa very competent talent who can hold their own anywhere amongst the best in the world. And we can see that from all the various listings. You see so many of people coming up now, and they're as competent as anyone all over the world. And now we even have local firms becoming international. And so, for me, all bets are off. No limits, and everything is open. Just be open and be willing to dare. Like Edith said, courage and resilience. Be willing to trouble the water. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Shaye. Very inspirational. Thank you so much. We've got a few questions that have come up on the chat. We've only got a couple of minutes, so if I can just beg your indulgence for maybe just a couple of minutes past 5, just so that we can get through them. The first is from Melissa Akinya, who runs the Black Lawyers Circle. She is asking, what has been the biggest challenge you've faced forging your career? I think we probably only got time for a response from one of the panelists. So have any of you got an interesting story that you can tell in relation to a challenge that you faced? That you want to share?
Oh, I'm happy to. I'm happy to. I honestly, looking at my career, I cannot actually just pick one challenge, because I've actually come to embrace as a truth. I'm not saying this is going to apply to you, Melissa, but for my life, that every challenge I face is preparing me for the next challenge. I feel like every step of my journey has been navigating one challenge after the other, by which I mean I don't see challenges necessarily as negative things. Some of them might be very painful experiences, like for example, you know, when people make assumptions, when people make assumptions that you're not going to be good enough for, you know, a particular pitch or a particular job, when you actually have the skills and you have to constantly have to prove yourself every day and every day and every day. So I would say, maybe if I was to look at an overall theme, it's been this idea of having to prove oneself over and over and over again. But I've come to acknowledge that as the reality of the world that I live in. And in doing so, it sharpens me, it makes me better. It doesn't mean to say the experience is any less painful or daunting, but I've decided to approach it from the perspective that, you know, this is my reality, this is my journey, and I'm going to take this challenge as preparation for the next one. So that's my perspective on things. But I'd say the biggest one is kind of fighting the perception.
Oh, that's beautiful. Thanks, Jennifer. And I think your resilience is one of your superpowers, right? That you're having to demonstrate it all the time. So that's amazing. Thank you. We've got another question in the chat from Mercy, which is specifically relating to barristers. And maybe Edith or Shay, you might be able to deal with this one. She's asking, what are the opportunities for barristers in particular to expand their practice in Africa? Are there advocacy opportunities, for example, in international arbitrations? And if so, which areas?
Let me quickly take one that really fits into one of the things I said, which I do, was the fact of the need to expand relationships. You know, so whether you're a barrister or a solicitor, it's good to work and allow them to expand your relationship with African firms, local who have opportunities and who can bring you in. I'll give you an example. My children went to school in Kenya. And I remember the first holiday they were going to come home. There were 10 of them and there were 9 nationalities. And those relationships they've kept till today. And so I'm saying that for us, whether you are abroad, whether you are a Black person in diaspora or anywhere, be open, be willing. LinkedIn is there, link up to people, build a network. You never know where that next big opportunity can come from. So it's important. The relationship is crucial. Thank you.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's been a real theme, hasn't it, throughout the whole of this session, how important building relationships is to building your practice. It doesn't matter whether it's in Africa or anywhere, but building relationships is absolutely key. Thank you, Shea. And then lastly, there's a question from Ediong, and it's beyond collaboration with law firms, how best can lawyers across borders collaborate in terms of knowledge and skills, whether in-house or in law firms? Who wants to take that one? Thank you, Shagan.
Yeah, I think the key there is using technology and using your willingness to share knowledge freely is one way I found most effective. There are organizations in Africa. I mean, we've talked about ILFA that Jennifer was on. That's one way of actually spreading technical know-how. The other way is by approaching clients, law firms directly, and offering to run training courses. We have found that in Nigeria in particular, where there's and Shea will understand this, the whole sort of Japa syndrome but many in-house teams are facing, which is a sort of depletion of talent, particularly of people who have knowledge of transactions from the past. One way we have been able to demonstrate value to our clients is to offer a series of training sessions on whether it's M&A deals or structured finance, and use of technologies. You can host it on a webinar like this. It doesn't mean you have to leave their offices. That is a way of really collaborating. You can do it in conjunction with law firms, but you can also do it directly with clients. And it doesn't have to be clients who have a necessarily talking to a need like I've just talked about. But the best way for clients or potential clients to know the value and skills you can bring is by demonstrating it through case studies, training sessions, and that willingness to share information and share knowledge. You learn from them and they can also learn from you. So direct collaboration with clients and potential clients, as well as law firms.
If I may come in, the ACGC and BCF are excellent platforms where, because by being a part, you are open to so many opportunities and your network and everything. So the BCF, the ACGC, absolutely fantastic opportunities. So those are things that people should leverage. And
I also thought about that too. We have networking opportunities, international local bar associations. These are very good opportunities to showcase your expertise. The Black Council Forum, all this, they help, build and forge partnerships. And also it would be great if, whether in diaspora or locally, you could help mentor lawyers, upcoming lawyers, get into forums that support CSR. This can help forge relationships that can move such things forward. Yeah.
Fantastic. I think that's a brilliant note on which to end. Thank you so much to each and every one of you, our panelists, for just the wonderful, really inspiring shares. This was something that's been on my heart to do for a long time, and actually this has exceeded my expectations. So huge thanks to you for everything that you've shared today. This is the first of a series of sessions We have recorded this. I know lots of people registered, perhaps couldn't attend, but definitely wanted to hear the conversation. We will be sharing the recording. We will also be sharing details of future sessions. I would just ask that we do one really practical thing, which is to connect with each other. Someone mentioned LinkedIn. There's a list of all of those that have attended this session, not just the panelists, but those that are in the room. Let's build these connections, guys. This is what, this is how we build community. First of all, by having these conversations, but then by being really intentional in connecting with one another. So thank you so much for your time. Sorry that we've run slightly over. If you have questions that you weren't able to ask, please get in touch. We would love to be able to address them on a future session. If you have other areas that you would like us to address as part of this webinar series, please contact myself or Sharon Thomas. We'd be really, really pleased to hear from you. But thank you, everyone, and have a fantastic week. Thank you so much for today.
Thank you very much.
Everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you,
Jennifer, good to see you.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks.
Sharon,
Jennifer,
Cynthia.
Cynthia.
Thank you.
Hi, Sheg. Sheg, take care. Take care, Sharon.
Take care. Shags,
Shagun,
bye.
thanks. Bye.
Thank you so much.